Many wrestlers have been involved in fights and other forms of physical confrontations outside the ring. From Chris Jericho exchanging words heatedly with a fan, to Vader attacking an interviewer for asking an absurd question, and even Alberto Del Rio getting a black eye from getting jumped by fans. These are some of the wrestlers who have been caught on camera in such fights. First, we start with the one between Eddie Guerrero versus Kurt Angle. Eddie Guerrero and Kurt Angle had good chemistry in the ring with each other, but in a lumberjack match between them in 2005, it was one of their worst matches. Both fighters are perfectionists, and so anything less than that would be deemed unacceptable. After the match, Angle confronted Guerrero backstage, claiming to have carried Guerrero through the match. This resulted in a physical altercation between them, with Guerrero pushing Angle away. Guerrero attempted to take Angle down, with Angle trying to counter with a facelock. However, the brawl was broken up by the Big Show. Guerrero and Kurt Angle managed to patch things up and continue their working relationship. The early interactions between Kurt Angle and Eddie Guerrero in WWE were unpredictable but always memorable. They first crossed paths in the early 2000s, with their initial encounters hinting at the chemistry they would later fully realize. Angle's straightforward by-the-book competitor was the perfect opposite to Guerrero's lovable rogue, who lived by his own rules. Their early matches were competitive but respectful, with each man testing the other's limits. Angle's wrestling style was a foil to Guerrero's aerial attacks and submission maneuvers, creating a captivating contrast for the audience. These matches laid the groundwork for what would become one of the most engaging rivalries in WWE history. Next is a fan getting into an argument with Chris Jericho. Chris Jericho versus a fan. Wrestling legend Chris Jericho has never been scared to speak his mind and stand up for what he believes in, and this was seen during an altercation in 2016 when Jericho had a heated argument with a fan in New York City. The lead singer of Fozzy was seen standing outside Irving Plaza following a tribute show for David Z when a confrontation began between the former world champion and a supposed fan. TMZ reported at the time that the fan was very aggressive towards Jericho after Jericho stopped taking photographs with fans and just wanted to leave. Thanks to this, the fan and Jericho began to throw verbal shots at each other, including F-bombs. Jericho would later apologize for the incident, citing it was simply boiled over anger following the death of David Z. He stated, "I was not in a good state of mind at that time, and instead of ignoring a pushy, aka rude, fan, which is what I would usually do, I snapped. My apologies to all involved, and God bless David Z." Goldberg versus Chris Jericho. When Goldberg joined the WWE in 2003, he brought with him a lot of baggage from his time in WCW, as well as a reportedly poor attitude. Goldberg held a lot of grudges, and one of these superstars he didn't seem to like was Chris Jericho. Goldberg and Jericho were initially supposed to work a program back in WCW, but Goldberg would squash these plans, citing that Jericho wasn't even at his level, though would finally explode in April of 2003 during a Royal main event, which featured Jericho teaming with Triple H to take on Booker T and Shawn Michaels. Goldberg was reportedly extremely critical about Jericho backstage. Once Jericho headed backstage, he was informed that Goldberg had been bad-mouthing him, so Jericho naturally confronted him. What ensued was a shoving match back and forth, but this was until Goldberg proceeded to grab Jericho by the throat. Jericho eventually managed to get Goldberg in a front facelock before the two former world champions would be separated. The two would then shake hands and call a truce, and the two would go on to work a program together in summer of 2003. Sheamus versus Sin Cara. There aren't too many details surrounding the 2014 fight between Sheamus and Sin Cara, but what we do know is that the fight took place over something ridiculously petty. According to the reports, Sin Cara was being checked out by the medical trainer backstage on a medical table. Sheamus reportedly came into the locker room and made a passing comment in relation to how he was more important than Sin Cara and that he should be given priority. Seeing Cara getting off the table in a brawl between the two ensued, with Sin Cara apparently getting the best of Sheamus. This wasn't the first time that Sheamus reportedly got beat up. There was an infamous story when he was beaten up by Yoshitatsu, as Sheamus was refusing to give Yoshi money that was owed to him, and so Yoshi entered a brawl with Sheamus and got the better of him. So it appears that Sheamus has had an issue with a number of superstars throughout his career. Wade Barrett versus the Police. In 2008, WWE had high hopes for Wade Barrett. He was seen as one of the best young talents in their Florida Championship Wrestling territory and had big plans for his future. However, Barrett almost threw his whole WWE career out of the window in 2008. Barrett was arrested and charged with battery of a police officer following an incident with a female police officer outside of a bar in Tampa, Florida. Barrett had got into a physical altercation with a plainclothed officer, which ultimately led to his arrest. The charges were eventually dropped, and luckily the incident wouldn't impact Barrett's WWE future, as he would debut on the main roster under 2 years later. Born on August 10, 1980 in Penwortham, Lancashire, England, Stuart Alexander Bennett, better known by his ring name Wade Barrett, embarked on a journey that would lead him to the grand stages of world wrestling entertainment. His towering frame and commanding presence made him a natural in the world of professional wrestling. Before his rise to fame, Barrett had a varied background, including bare-knuckle boxing, which he claimed gave him the grit and resilience needed in the wrestling industry. Barrett's potential was undeniable, and WWE took notice. He first made waves in the company's developmental territory, Florida Championship Wrestling, where he honed his skills and developed his persona. His charisma and in-ring prowess caught the eyes of WWE officials, and it wasn't long before he was positioned as a future star of the company. And talking about wrestlers with persona, Booker T was such a wrestler, and he also had an out-of-the-ring fight with Batista. Batista versus Booker T. Batista and Booker T are two of the most popular superstars in WWE history. The two were seemingly beloved by everyone they worked with, but for some reason they had an issue that resulted in an altercation in the summer of 2006. The story goes that the two had a disagreement whilst filming the commercial for 2006's SummerSlam pay-per-view. It was said to be a respect issue, as Booker T believed that Batista had been bad-mouthing the SmackDown locker room. Nevertheless, the two got into a heated exchange, and Booker T was said to have gotten the better of the exchange. Now, what was interesting about this is that shortly after the incident, the two men actually began fielding and would even face off at SummerSlam for the world title. According to Kurt Angle, who was also there filming for the commercial, it was all one massive misunderstanding. Angle believed that Batista wasn't being disrespectful in the comments made towards the SmackDown locker room, and Booker simply misunderstood what Batista said. According to Booker T, however, the fight was a lot more physical than websites were reporting at the time. Booker T's account of the incident went as follows. I told Batista, "Hey man, let's just get this out in the open. I really don't like you. You really don't like me, but we gotta work together. It's our jobs. We've gotta go out and perform together. You know what I mean? If you ever cross me, you're gonna have to deal with these," pointing at his fists. Vader on Good Morning Kuwait. In the past, the subject of whether or not wrestling was fake was seen as a taboo subject, and referring to wrestling as fake to an actual wrestler was one of the most insulting things you could ever do. This was seen when Vader and then WWF champion The Undertaker were guests on the Good Morning Kuwait show back in April of 1997 to promote the WWF's tour of the Middle East. During the show, host Bassam Al-Othman asked The Undertaker the following question. In Kuwaiti, and I'm sure you heard this before, they say this wrestling is not for real. Is it like you act? The Undertaker replied in a diplomatic manner. However, the show host didn't give Vader a chance to give his side on the question, which resulted in Vader interrupting the host and saying he wants to answer that question as well. My Stu colleague, the heavyweight champion of the world, very diplomatic individual. I'm perhaps not quite so diplomatic. In fact, I find your question and your remarks insulting to what I do. He then flipped the table and grabbed the host by his tie and yelled, "Does that feel fake, huh? Does it?" Vader was charged with assault and use of obscene language. His arrest unfortunately fell at the start of the religious holiday, meaning Vader was trapped in Kuwait for 2 weeks before he was let go. Shawn Michaels versus Bret Hart. The real-life hatred between Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart hit a fever pitch in the summer of 1997 as the two came to blows backstage at a Raw show. The brawl between the two men surfaced after Shawn Michaels made a passing comment in a promo a few weeks prior that Hart was potentially having an affair with WWE diva Sunny. The story goes that Shawn Michaels went for a punch and missed. Hart then punched Shawn Michaels and began to swing him by his hair. Michaels then proceeded to go after Hart's injured leg before the two were separated. Shawn Michaels would then storm into Vince McMahon's office and inform Vince that he was quitting and he would go to WCW. Obviously, this never happened, and Shawn Michaels and Hart continued their feud on screen throughout 1997. Buff Bagwell versus Shane Helms. One of the most popular backstage fights in WWE is a fight between Buff Bagwell and Shane Helms. Buff came into the WWE in 2001 with an inflated ego, and he was reportedly extremely disliked backstage, with hardly anyone wanting to work with him. The story goes that Bagwell began to badmouth Shane Helms and even slapped him. This resulted in Helms hitting Buff with a frozen water bottle, and Helms began unloading on Buff. This incident gave Helms a newfound status in the WWE locker room, gaining much respect. According to Helms, he actually cracked Buff's head wide open. He revealed, "Everybody in there knows I banged my shoulder up, so then he comes and hits me from behind, and I kinda just threw a water bottle at him like this, and then I jumped out of the ring." He goes on to say, "And this was just kind of to distract him because now I'm going to go punch him in the face, but he cracked his head open, and he was bleeding all over the place, and I'm like, oh, FK, Enzo and Joey Janela." The digital realm was the battleground for Enzo Amore and Joey Janela long before their physical confrontation. The feud, fueled by a series of online exchanges, escalated as both wrestlers took to social media to air their grievances and challenge each other's credibility within the wrestling industry. The simmering feud between Enzo Amore and Joey Janela erupted into a physical altercation on a summer night at the PNC Bank Arts Center in Holmdel, New Jersey. The venue, primarily known for hosting musical acts, became the unlikely stage for a wrestling showdown during a Blink-182 and Lil Wayne concert. According to reports, the encounter was not a scheduled bout, but a spontaneous clash that caught attendees and the wrestling community off guard. The incident began when Janela approached Enzo to introduce himself, a gesture that quickly devolved into a heated exchange. Witnesses described the scene as chaotic, with both wrestlers assuming fighting stances, although no significant punches were thrown. The standoff was brief, with onlookers and security quickly intervening to prevent the situation from escalating further. The story of the altercation was told in a series of tweets by both men. Enzo first tweeted, "I'm glad you introduced yourself because I couldn't pick you out of a lineup. You don't want no smoke, and now I know it, there's only two things that smell like fish. One's fish. At Janela Bay, straight." Janela then replied with, "Not at work, so I saw the dude and walked up and I said, 'Hi, I'm Joey Janela at the Blink-182 show,' and we proceeded to have, I am not Lennox Lewis, to have the fist fight of the year. I'm not a but we had fun." Randy Orton versus a fan. Randy Orton has had anger issues in the past, but over the recent years, he seemed to have mellowed out into a family guy who takes great pride in his work and family. However, an incident at a gym in early 2017 caused Orton to revert back to his prior days of having a short temper. WWE superstar Randy Orton likes his space, especially at the gym. That became very clear to a fan of his at a gym in Jonesboro, Arkansas, where Orton was training before Monday's WWE SmackDown event. "I approached him by myself and said, 'Can I get a picture of you?' The fan, Anthony Martin, told the Northeast Arkansas Report. He gave me a fist bump and replied, 'Sorry, I can't hear you,' pointing to his earphones, and they went their separate ways." Martin then snapped a photo of Orton, and the Viper lost his cool. The fan stated that he saw me snap the picture and came up to me, got in my face, and said, "What the hell are you doing?" I said, "No goddamn pictures, are you stupid?" I said, "No. You said you couldn't hear me still in my face." I said, "No disrespect, if you want I can delete it." He said, "Yeah, delete it." I said, "Okay, seriously, no disrespect." He later said to my friends, "Keep picture. Enjoy your workout." Former WWE and WCW superstar Lance Storm also weighed in on Orton's run-in, defending his fellow wrestling star and arguing that the fans' behavior was ignorant gym etiquette and straight-up rude. Del Rio and McIntyre versus fans. SummerSlam 2013 was one of the most acclaimed SummerSlam events of all time. However, there was an incident that occurred during the SummerSlam weekend in 2013 that often gets swept under the rug due to how positive the reception of the pay-per-view was. The incident involved the then world champion Alberto Del Rio and Drew McIntyre. The story goes that Del Rio got into a verbal confrontation with an individual at an Irish bar in LA. A group joined in with the confrontation until suddenly the group started to fight Del Rio. Luckily, McIntyre stepped in to assist Del Rio and fend off the attackers. Del Rio then showed up to the pay-per-view with a black eye, which was explained on commentary that the black eye came from Del Rio taking a kill switch on SmackDown prior to the pay-per-view number, which was somewhat suspicious. JBL versus Joey Styles. JBL obtained a reputation during his time in WWE for being a massive bully and mainly bullying those individuals who couldn't really defend themselves. On a 2008 tour of Iraq, JBL set his sights on Joey Styles for the majority of the tour, and Styles simply had enough, so he confronted him and then proceeded to punch the former WWE champion right in the face, knocking him out in the process. An anonymous friend of JBL told the Wrestling Observer, "I always shake my head when he lowers himself to these high school spectacles. He's such a smart, funny, engaging person, and a good guy at his core, but he is compelled to act in a deplorable manner, and it has come back to bite him in the ass." There were no further problems between the two on the tour. Many wrestlers were privately thrilled, feeling JBL got what he deserved. Styles, meanwhile, was rightly downplaying the story to those who asked him about it, but on camera during the Slammy Awards, he had a spring in his step and was smiling a lot more because he knew he had backed down the big bad bully. Chris Jericho versus Brock Lesnar. The main event of SummerSlam 2016 featured one of the most dramatic moments in SummerSlam history as Lesnar proceeded to bust open Randy Orton with a stiff elbow to the head. That's not a regular occurrence in WWE. By this point, blood was also extremely rare, so the combination of the two left many confused as to what was going on, but it made for a brutal, dramatic finale to the pay-per-view. Since wrestling looks completely legitimate, WWE legend Chris Jericho was irate backstage. It was believed that Lesnar had just gone into business for himself and had shocked Orton. When Lesnar got backstage, Jericho confronted Lesnar, and reports at the time stated that Jericho actually pushed the former UFC champion against the wall. Another report indicated that Lesnar actually kissed Jericho on the forehead and said, "Kiss me back." Luckily, both men were separated by Vince McMahon before the scene got too violent and out of control. Santino confronts Jim Cornette. The issues between Santino Marella and Jim Cornette began all the way back when Cornette was running Ohio Valley Wrestling. At the time, the Boogeyman was just starting his gimmick, and Cornette needed everyone to sell how scary the gimmick was. However, Santino started smiling and chuckled. Cornette took exception to this and berated Santino backstage and ended up slapping him across the face multiple times. I was with my daughter, actually. She was 10 at the time, I believe, and we're just in the audience, you know. She's in front of me. Here's the reason I'm smiling. Because the Boogeyman, she was shitting her pants, right? So I went to grab her because she was trembling. And that smirk on my face of me saying, "Oh, this is going to be good," infuriated Cornette. Harley Race confronts Vader. At a convention in 2012 at the Legends of the Ring convention in New Jersey, two wrestling legends got into a heated altercation. The story goes that Harley Race and Vader came to blows in front of fans. Race punched Vader in the face, Vader punched back, but he missed and struck a convention worker who was seriously hurt in the altercation. Rob Feinstein from RF Video took to his personal Facebook page to address the situation. He stated, "Vader made a smart-ass comment which pissed Harley off. Harley, who is crippled now, struck Vader in the head with a punch. Vader went to strike back, but instead hit a promoter who was standing nearby." He continued, "The promoter, from what I was told, had to get an ice pack, and Vader walked out of the room. That was basically how it went down, and I'm shocked that Vader would do that in front of the fans. I was waiting for Orndorff to do a run-in." Big Show versus Great Khali. The Big Show and the Great Khali's backstage fight is perhaps the most famous backstage fight of all time. It took place following a house show in which Khali apparently stole Big Show's trademark chop in the corner. When the duo got back to the locker room, Big Show asked why Khali kept stealing his moves. Khali was confused as to what the Big Show was referring to. The Big Show then threw Khali's bag across the locker room and the two giants faced off. The two then had a legitimate fist fight with them, throwing brutal punches back and forth. The fight ended when the Big Show humorously tripped over a chair and Khali got on top of him before other wrestlers separated the two men. The next day, Vince McMahon held a backstage meeting with both guys, and he made Big Show apologize to Khali for throwing the first punch. In response, Khali accepted the apology and said that he had no problem, bro. Years later, Khali said in an interview that after the fight, Big Show wept in the corner. The Big Show himself admitted, according to Jericho, that he lost the fight as he was the first one to fall, chair or no chair. Bundy confronts Scott Hall. Scott Hall has well-established personal demons, and sometimes these demons have led to altercations outside of the ring. In November of 2017, during a fan convention in New York, Hall was reportedly messed up, and this resulted in the WWE Hall of Famer showing up late to the convention. Hall then started yelling at King Kong Bundy before Bundy lost his temper and began to attack Hall and started to choke him. According to Brutus Beefcake, he was in a vodka rage and started messing with the wrong guy, King Kong Bundy, and things went bad for him. Beefcake said that Bundy got his hands around Hall's neck before it was broken up. Vince McMahon versus Kofi Kingston. Did you know that WWE Chairman Vince McMahon and Kofi Kingston once had a legitimate fight backstage? Yeah, you heard right. In 2010, McMahon and Kofi were on the plane along with Chris Jericho and John Cena when the plane landed. According to Jericho, Vince made a passing comment to, "Maybe you'll get over one of these days." According to Jericho, he informed Kofi that he needed to challenge the chairman to a fight. "You have to go back on the plane and challenge him to a fight right now. If you don't, he'll know he can walk all over you whenever he wants. If you go challenge him, he'll love it and respect you for it." Kofi would ask Vince if he had an issue with him, and Vince reportedly responded with, "Maybe I do. Do you want to do something about it? What are you going to do about it?" After a verbal back and forth, Vince actually hit a double leg takedown on Kofi, and the two scuffled around on the floor before Vince got up and laughed about the situation. This is truly one of the most downright bizarre and unexpected backstage stories in WWE history, and Jericho later said Kofi got his respect for standing up for himself. Alicia Fox confronts Rousey's husband. One of the biggest stories of WrestleMania weekend in 2018 took place out of the ring, and it involved Alicia Fox and Ronda Rousey's husband, Travis Brown. A video surfaced online which saw Fox and Brown arguing at the Hyatt Regency Hotel in New Orleans. The footage, which was published by The Sun in the UK, started with Fox pointing a finger at Brown and calling him rude before saying, "I can't believe you." Brown is heard defending himself before Fox realizes she's being filmed and quickly slaps the camera away. The altercation resulted in Fox being pulled from the WrestleMania 34 Battle Royal. However, WWE declared that it was due to the injury rather than the bad PR that came from the video, probably being the most talked about point of the WrestleMania weekend. It's still unclear to this very day as to what actually caused the argument and what the extent of the issue was between the two. This brings us to the end of the video. If you enjoyed it, do well to click on any of the cards displayed on your screen.